You're never gonna guess what I just saw on the road. Take a look at this. Well, that's definitely something you don't see every day. Nerd alert, nerd alert. Get your pocket protectors and your calculators out because today we're going over wiring. That's right, we're going over this very exciting topic on the RX7. So stay tuned. So welcome back, drifters. Today we're out of the kitchen and we're back in the garage. So what we're looking at today is the RX7. Been having some issues with some of the wiring and some of the voltage problems. So basically I realized that when I first built this car, I had made a video about the electrical and the wiring and everything like that, but I guess I never released it. So the way that I built it was so that it was more like a race car wiring setup, but yet still able to ride on the street. I pretty much took a wiring harness that went to a C10, an older C10, and retrofitted it for the RX7. I mean, I even have the floor-mounted dimmer switch. But it wasn't exactly a direct fit. It was something that required a little bit of kind of... So it wasn't exactly a direct fit. It was something that I had to kind of modify and tweak. So one of the things that was hard to figure out was these window motors for the pop-ups. They didn't really have a really good diagram as to how it worked, and so I had to kind of just figure it out. Which that's what led me to building my relay board, which is what you'll see in a lot of like race cars and swap cars. They do this. It's not that complicated. It's a little complicated, but so basically I bought some cheap relays off of Amazon. They're just your typical Bosch relays and just built them up, figured out what needed relays and what didn't. So initially this thing needed 4 relays because I needed one for the lights, the pop-ups, the water pump, and the fuel pump. Now, I ended up getting rid of the electric water pump, so now that circuit's kind of useless, but I have it just in case if I ever switch back. But I'm still using the ones for the pop-ups and the lights and everything like that. The problem that I've been running into is that my accessory circuit is not working. So that means unless if the car's running, I don't get any lights, I don't get my turn signals, hazards, like none of it. Which, not a big deal for a race car, but when you're talking about, you know, driving on the street and stuff like that, you want that stuff to work if your car is dead. What's the point of having hazards if they don't work when the car is dead? I mean, I'm just saying. So this extremely long spiel is basically me just letting you know that what we're going to do is we're going to take the dash off so that way we can get behind there and take a look at some of the wiring, see if I can figure out why the accessory circuit's not turning on, as well as work on hooking up my speedometer, because I've had a speedometer on this car for about 2 years now and it's not worked once. The other thing that didn't work was the backup lights. So I got to figure out why that switch isn't working. I looked under the car and everything's hooked up. So either the switch went bad or potentially something isn't wired properly, which, considering I did this 2 years ago, it's possible. It's very possible. Before I get started on any of this too, I just want to get it out there before we get too far into the video, is if you want like a more in-depth analysis of like wiring and all that kind of stuff, let me know and I could try to make another video for like specific parts of this, because I know this could apply to a bunch of different types of builds. This is just like a general race car build. Like basically the way I did it is like hot rodding type wiring. It's not like a professional. I didn't use all like Deutsch connectors and all that kind of stuff. It's a pretty cheap setup, but it works pretty well for what I use. And I put a lot of safeguards into it. You know, I've got breakers, relays, big-ass fuses. I've got harness fuses. I've got fuses out the butt. So if you guys want some more, like, in-depth stuff, let me know. Like, specific areas or something like that. Maybe if you guys have RX7s and you're wondering, like, oh, how do the pop-ups work or this or that? And I'll make a separate video just for that, just to make sure, because I don't want to bore everybody to death. But if you do want to know, let me know. And I'll try to go in a little bit more in depth for you. So I'm going to get to taking the dash apart, and then we'll just see what happens from there. So let's do it. So just make a note that this bolt has been hanging on for dear life. That one over there is up, and then the one in the middle is just straight up missing. So sometimes drifting can do that to a car. So I'm just going to pop those out. I need to unhook my gauges because they're all kind of in there. I've got them mounted to the actual dash, and then we'll work on pulling the dash out, because I've tried laying down and doing this, and I'm not as flexible as I used to be. So we're going to take that out, and then we'll have direct access to everything. So I'm going to do that. you ever do something and then immediately regret doing it? That's pretty much how I feel right now. The thing about wiring is that even though you think like in your head you did everything right, and then you go back to look at it and you're like, oh my god, what was I thinking? So this is going to be a fun thing to try to fix and trace. But at least now we have a little bit better access to it. It's still kind of a pain, but I can at least see what I'm doing a little bit better, and I can show you a little bit better what I'm doing. So it's kind of a win-win for the both of us. So now you get a little bit better idea what's going on. This is the main fuse block, and it's got a bunch of different little things in it. So we got the two relays, one's for accessories and one's for something else. I don't remember what it was. But then over here is where the custom thing is that I built. So this main fuse block, I've got grounds running to one spot and power going to the others. And then each of these are for a different thing. And then down here is the relay. And then these all get powered through a distribution block, which makes it easy for basically sending off the different signals. So we have a 12 volt source, a switched 12 volt source, a ground, and a fused source. I know this sounds kind of complicated, and it is a little bit complicated, but relays are pretty simple once you figure them out. There's the four terminals. You've got ground. You've got the main power, which is like the 30 terminal. You've got switched power, and I believe it's fused power. I have to look. It's been a while since I looked at it. But the distribution block just kind of cleans everything up nicely, so you're running a lot less wires. So instead of running like 16 wires the length of the car or to the different accessories, you run 16 small wires that are only about this long. So that way you have less resistance, because the longer the wire is, the higher the gauge needs to be in order for it to work properly. A lot of things come into play there, but the idea is that you want to keep the wire as short as possible, because when we're doing this, we don't want to keep adding wires and making it all just disgusting, because there's already a ton of wires. This just kind of helps simplify it, and it looks fairly clean. So this main wire here runs from the battery directly into the circuit breaker, so that's the first line of defense before anything else is going to break out. And then we've got these main lines that run out. So this goes to the distribution block here, okay? And this is just straight from the battery into fuses, okay? So that's a 12 volt source going into fuses. The other one runs out to the starter. So that's 12 volts, and that runs straight to the starter, and then from there, the harness gets power. So if the breaker inside there doesn't pop, and then it makes it all the way through the starter, then this is the second line of defense. If this pops, which it's a 60 amp fuse, then it'll protect the entire harness. But then this wire runs all the way back into the fuse block, where there's another fuse just in case. So there's multiple fuses to protect the engine and the whole entire car and the harness and everything, just in case if there is an overload of some sort. But usually the breaker trips before anything else. It's popped on me like a few times because of the starter binding. But now that we got that fixed, that shouldn't be an issue anymore. So then the other thing I had to do was make switches. So, whew, it's hot. I am like sweating my ass off today. The other thing I had to do was make switches because I wanted to be able to switch these things on and off pretty easily. What up, Louie? You being loud over there, buddy? We'll see if he wants to chill out today. The rooster's kind of going nuts. He's kind of a dick. I got this switch panel, which is just a generic. You could even do like just basic toggle switches. I just got this because when I was originally building the car, I wanted to do something race car. So I got me one of these, set it up, because it's got built-in breakers. So each of these is a... Oh, son of a bitch. It was Austin. Turns out he's getting off of work, and he's decided to get steaks. So I guess we're having steaks tonight, so that's kind of cool. But anyway, back to the switches. So each of these things is a little breaker. Funny thing is, though, I actually had problems with these when I first put everything together, and some of these the breakers would pop and I couldn't get them to go back in, and if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't do these kind of things. They're kind of crappy. So you could probably see back there that it kind of looks like a mess. So each of these switches is going to have a switch source, it's going to have a ground, and it's going to have a power. And then each of those I ran out to other parts of the car depending on what it was switching on and off. The cool part is a lot of these are run off of like jumper wires, so you get to save a little bit on a little bit of the wiring distance when you do it this way. So this switch here is the main battery switch, and I got that mainly just because I needed something to where I could actually just cut the power to everything if I needed to, and I know that this is directly from the battery. So I kill this, it kills everything. This is like the emergency cutoff switch, essentially. Now, if this was a legit race car and it was legitly built, that switch would be on the outside of the car. Usually it's up near like where the wipers go, and it's so that way they can kill it if there's like a rollover, or maybe you're knocked unconscious or something like that. But for this being a street car as well, which, I mean, it's not really a street car, but it is technically, I just wanted to have it within my reach, so I put it there. Really no other reason besides that. And then, of course, the rest of the harness is pretty simple. A lot of it's just running lights. We had to run battery down to the fuel pump in the back. We have separate grounds back there as well. And all the grounds are to bare metal or to the frame, like to some level to where it's actually grounding pretty well. And then, I mean, the rest of it is just running in through here and then back here into the fuel pump, which is just positive and ground. Same thing with all the gauges. You got the fuel sending unit, positive ground. This stuff's grounded. Everything's grounded. It's really, really simple back here. And I just rewired all the lights to match. I mean, the lights are very simple. It's positive and ground for the most part. And then there may be like the positive is usually like a switch positive. So like on the brakes, they work through the brake light circuit, and then that sends the positive signal to those wires. But if they're the bright lights like your headlights, they have to be run through a relay. Otherwise, you'll burn up your wires and might have a fire. So that's why I have those relay circuits. Let me see if I can pull the wires up and show how the window motors, the pop-ups work, because that's kind of a complicated thing that I think some people might want to know. Okay, so down here, this is the actual pop-up wire harness thing. It looks like this. This is the connector. And there's like 3 wires in there. You got a red, yellow, a green, white with a green stripe, and a red with a blue stripe, I believe. And those are all the things that control the pop-up. Okay, I remember how they work. So the way that the pop-ups work on the RX7 is you got 4 wires. You've got the ground, and then you've got your voltage, which is just like your basic fused voltage coming from the relay. So it's the stuff that comes out from the relay. And then you got the yellow and red, which is either up or down, I don't remember, and then yellow and blue, which is either up or down. So what happens is once the main portion of it gets enough voltage and you flip the switch, it's going to supply voltage to either up or down. So depending on whether or not when you flick the switch, it's going to send voltage, and if that's the one that you want, then it'll hold it up by sending it voltage, and then whenever you want it down, you flip the switch the other way, it'll go down by supplying voltage to the other side. It's got a weird system in it. It's the 4-wire thing, but yeah. So it's not that bad to figure out once you get it, but it is a little bit tricky at first. But it's just basically supplying voltage to determine whether you want it up or down. And that goes the same for both sides. The color might be a little bit different on the other side, but it's the same general concept. Oh, I guess we also put in an electric fan, but that's running through one of the relays as well. On this one, we ran a hydraulic brake switch, so it looks like this. So basically, dang, Louie. So on ours, it's hydraulic, and it runs through this hydraulic switch. So as the brake pressure increases, this switch is going to toggle, and it's going to take voltage from one side, send it to the other, which is going to light up the brakes. And that's basically how that switch works. The only thing is, I don't really like this because sometimes this thing gets knocked loose. Sometimes we have problems with that, and sometimes it's just not as reliable as a foot switch. So the hardest part is just converting all the RX7 stuff to the GM style harness. But luckily a GM harness is really simple. The hardest part is just getting like the little things like the pop-ups and the tail lights and getting all those things to like work the way you want it to. And right now I'm struggling with a problem with the actual ignition because I can't get it to go to accessory, and I'm not sure exactly why. It doesn't make sense because everything's hooked up the way it's supposed to, so that's one of the things I got to figure out. But I'm not going to film all that because that's just going to be me like, well, let's try this, and let's try that, and let's try... It's kind of boring, and I don't want to bore you guys. So, yeah, if you guys have questions about electrical, or if you want to see more stuff about like the harness or RX7 specific stuff, put it in the comments, let me know, and I'll try to cover it in the next video. I think that most of it's pretty intuitive. If you're getting this far into building a car, you probably already have a good knowledge about it, because this isn't something that you would just up and decide to do like a crazy person like me. Because, yeah, I just kind of one day was like, I'm going to build a race car. That was not the smartest idea. because there's a lot of things that I did in this car that just make no sense at all, and it's just because I didn't know what I was doing. So, you know, in my next build, it will be better. When we build the Mustang, I have a plan. I know what we're doing. I'm going to use a lot of the mistakes that I did on this one, and I'm going to not do that on the Mustang, or fingers crossed not do that on the Mustang. So anyway, guys, if you guys like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you didn't, dislike it. Either way is fine with me. And I just hope that y'all have a great day, and remember, keep it nice and easy.
Hey, so I noticed that you're still here. Most people don't make it this far, so I'm assuming you might have liked the video. So why don't you just click that little subscribe button? I don't know, just saying, you know, help a guy out. Thanks.